So, after a pause and before the Christmas holidays come rapidly approaching, let's do one more chapter of this monitoring and evaluation made easy. Easy, why? Because it should be understood by everyone from the A to the Z. So chapter 5, so we're going to do some more on the types and sources of data and some important distinctions and considerations, because of course there's plenty to say about that. So last chapter, you remember we introduced some key sources of data: population-based, institutions and service-based. So we're going to talk more about that, okay? Why? Because there's some important considerations, especially something that we need to know what our data represent. Very important, okay? So this representativity is very important. So let's start by saying, okay, one of the sources of data that people use mostly, but not entirely, is population-based data. So it means that you want to find out what happens in either your entire population, and that's usually the country. It could be also regions. So what is called subnationally. And then, of course, you can, draw down until local. You can have local populations. So it's always very important to have those concepts, key, well-defined. Especially why? Because we're going to quickly talk about when you don't want the entire population, but you want to represent that entire population, which is called a sample. So very importantly, when we want data from a population, it's usually cross-sectional, so at a point in time. Yes, you can have also a routine or over time, but let's focus on that. The most important and well-known is, of course, the census. The census is what is counting, and of course, 2020 here in the US is the time when, and every 10 years, in fact, countries should conduct their census of the entire population, the census. So that's what? That's 100% of our population. So, so that gives you, of course, all the information you require. You're subdivided it by all the different characteristics that you want. I mean, sex or gender and, socioeconomic, as it's called. So you can do ethnicity, or you can do income, and then you can do education level, and then you can do, and so you can subdivide your data by all these different types of characteristics of your respondents, of the census takers, okay? So here comes a key concept now, especially when we, as many different institutions do, is that we cannot. Why? Because censuses are done by the country, right? Yeah, you can do a census of but that's not a census. That will be just, or you may be calling it a census, but it's of your local population. But if it's in a country, it happens every 10 years. It typically costs millions and millions of dollars, of course. So what you want, if you want something that, yes, represents the entire population, but you want a survey, right? And for a survey to happen, you need to know one key concept: how homogeneous is your population. Why? Because if you're going to explore the cultural, like I say, religious, geographical, several characteristics of your population, you need to know whether that sample that you have selected is representing what? The entire population. So now is when we are going to start introducing the first graphs. I always do for you, so that you can see them more easily. So again, census being, so I'm introducing this slide for you, and so the census is what? The 100% of our population. But say that I want the sample, and so what I'm doing is, okay, I'm doing a sample, so you can see it's a shade that it's within the bigger one. it's a smaller, and so obviously it's going to cost less, but still it's a big enterprise. And in many cases, and in fact, I've been involved with a demographic and health surveys that is being done. It's USAID funded, and it's being done in many countries around the world. But typically it's done what? It's done every 5 years or 4 years. It depends on the country and the resources, of course. Some countries are starting to do their own surveys as well. So this is where you start introducing this concept of how homogeneous, because your sample, how representative is your sample of the entire population. And now is where we introduce, for example, what if, oh wow, look at that corner. This is a corner where there is, we're drawing maybe it's a church, it's a congregation, it's a corner of that country, that place, that is different. Why? Because the people around, they have different beliefs or maybe different practices, or I remember the beliefs are many times translated into different behavior. And so, whoa, if your sample is not including that corner, then you better. Why? Because it's not representative. And in fact, some of you may want to, a while ago, several months ago, I actually did a piece in LinkedIn, you may want to look for it, called Representativity. What is being representative? And I also did, some conversation to that respect. So what happens is that then you realize, what if? And so what if I want to represent that corner? So it means that I need to realize that it's not a homogeneous, but it's a heterogeneous population. Then we have segments, then we have subpopulations that need to be representative, okay? And this is where we start looking at how do we represent those subpopulation? And there's another key concept that comes on board called stratify. This is a stratum. This is a segment, a section of your population that is different, and that's why it has to be represented. So what then comes the notion that you have to stratify your population if you feel that there are subpopulations that need to be represented. And so we give you another slide, and so, whoa, what happens if now it's not only one section, but there's 2, 3, 4, and you will see these two coming up, slides coming up that are telling you, well, okay, so maybe now I know that the first population, the central population, is different from that one in the corner. And whoa, now I realize there's an island, and the island is part of the population, but because it's an island, probably different, so I need to build another stratum there. And then now I realize, oh, there's part that is a desert with cactus, and then another one that now is a heavily industrial area. So if I want to, and people are living depending on those conditions and acting and behaving differently. So this is where then comes the concept of you need to stratify. And so when you stratify, what is it that you do? So what you have to do, and then this last slides comes very handy. Then you have to find out and have to know, from other censuses from past time, what's the percentage of population? So what you do then is now, what used to be your 100%, your sample represented 100% of your population, now no longer. And so now you see in that last slide that you realize, oh boy, so if that corner is 5% of the population, I need to subdivide my sample and ensure that I will have at least 5% of my sample will include that population. Now the island is 1.5%. I need to include that percentage. Whatever is my total of the sample, that needs to be subdivided by those percentages. And of course, the one with in the desert is 12%. Well, if it's 12%, I need to represent it. And finally, if that entire urban or highly industrial section of a population is 9%. I need to have that in mind. Okay, so that's very important, and that is a key concept we need to have when we have and we are planning and designing our sample. Okay, so that's very interesting, very good to review here. Okay, but say now that now we're over, because we don't want to go. I mean, there's many more things we could look at, you know, on the sampling, but for now that's sufficient. But now let's move into services. So now that's another very frequently used source of the data that I'm collecting, and it's the services. And when I say services, is like in my case, as you know, working in public health, I have looked at it from the point of view of the health posts, the health centers, and then if you go higher levels, you get into maybe a district hospital, and then you get into a regional hospital, and then of course a national level. So this is where you have that your data is going to be in many ways it's going to be different, because one thing that you're able to do with services is collect it longitudinally. And why? Because it's a routine type of data. And this is where we come into what we call the information systems. In this case would be the health information system. And it's, again, key to know a few things that you need to have in mind, because what happens is you are going to start collecting data from services. So from maybe populations, if we're talking about a very low level, very field level that are coming every day, and so maybe you're going to start having, oh well, let's make sure that every month at least we have all the information, and then we're going to collect it. But usually what happens with the health information system, you are going to report it, and you report it upwards, and so you report it, say, to the municipal or to the district level. So here is where you have three key considerations, and we're going to use also a slide to say to illustrate that your data has to be complete, meaning that it has to represent all those individuals and populations from which you're getting that data. So this is very important, that you need to know, for example, what's your eligible population. If you're going to see children under 1, children under 5, you're going to see mothers, or you're going to see pregnant women, you need to have a sense of what is the population, and this is called the catchment population. What is the population around my area, the area that I'm responsible for, and what is it then that I expect that if I could do 100% coverage, that's another important definition. If I'm going to have 100% coverage, can I see those 1,000 women who are going to be this year pregnant, or am I not going to see them? So this is very important to know. What's the fraction of that population, again, that I will be covering, that I will be seeing. So very important to know what is that the completeness of my information. Okay, why? Because now that we're talking about services, we know, and that we're going to start seeing now. I'm going to show you this other slide or this picture where you're going to see that, okay, there might be population that will never go to those services, because for one reason or other. There's population that will come to your services, but there's going to be populations that bypass. They will not go. Hey, maybe sometimes it happens that they know a physician, they know a nurse, they know a midwife, they know a person who can provide the services that they need, and they will gladly, if they know, they have the means, of course. This is also a consideration about the means Obviously, if there's access, there's a road, there's transportation, the person can pay for the transportation. So you're going to have that not direct but indirect access. So that person is not going to be seen by you. Maybe it's going to be seen at the district level, but it's going to be counted. That's very important. So very good to know that all those different levels of access. Okay, so one is completeness. What is it that how complete that information is going to get? And of course, the other concept is accuracy. Accuracy, meaning that I need to make sure that if I have a way to diagnose and to know what is it that I am recording, because remember, this data comes from registers, from ledgers, from logbooks, from registers. So I need to know what is it that I am registering. And of course, the important thing is that I need to make sure that my tool, my instrument, is providing me the information that I need. So the tool needs to be well done, and it needs to be, very importantly, needs to be something that I understand, that I know how to feel entirely, okay? Because accuracy, if there's error, then you don't have accuracy, okay? But when we are talking about accuracy, there's also some known and sometimes unknown ways in which people don't realize, or sometimes people are conscious. For example, I've been seeing the issue of female genital mutilation. And now what's happening in many parts of the world is that before it was being done by traditional practitioners, and now there is what's called medicalization. So some actual health practitioners in some of those health centers are conducting those mutilation procedures. And so if they come and they know that they are obliged to report that, they might either sub-report, under-report, or they might even change if they know that it's being done at a very young age. They might even not want to fill in that it was done at that very young age. So you can see that accuracy can be, again, unconscious, or it can be consciously inaccurate. Very important. And finally, the third consideration is timeliness. Why? Because maybe it's all accurate, maybe it's as complete as you could do it, but you missed the deadline. And so that district is not getting you, say, in the 10 days after the quarter has finished. They should have gotten your records, and your monthly data, but you didn't. So what happens is that district is going to have some underrepresentation that month. But if they come and still, reported the next quarter, what's going to happen? That next quarter is going to be over. It's going to be, and this, in fact, with COVID-19, we've seen some of that fluctuation, because if somebody has purposely or unpurposely, it's been said that in for example, in Florida, that happened, that if purposely you don't want to include all the cases until a certain period, for example, election day, then you're going to sub-report. But why are you going to put it afterwards? So you can see that you can, unfortunately, you can play with the data, and you can do some wrong things with the data as well. So key for this session today is to know about how can we consider that this data that we are reporting on is accurate, is complete, and it's timely. And by the way, timely, some fluctuations happen because of seasonality, which means that yes, in some periods in summer, there might be more diarrhea than in winter. In winter might be more respiratory diseases, etc. So you can have fluctuations, but make sure that you understand if it's real fluctuation or if there is problems with the data collection. So that's enough for now, but thank you for observing and from seeing this this section and this chapter that I have for you. All the best, and if I don't see you until next year, of happy holidays. Let's see what happens. Bye-bye. All right.